Well, hey everybody, and welcome to episode 37 of the Pixar Post podcast. As usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And in this episode, we're going to talk about the newly announced Sanjay's Super Team short film, which will be premiering ahead of The Good Dinosaur in theaters on November 25th. We're going to talk about the little mini lava documentary, kind of like behind the scenes look. And of course, we're going to talk about some Inside Out news and continue our interview kind of audio recording session that we had with production designer Ralph Eggleston.
Ooh.
And this one is actually going to be the group interview that we had, as well as our one-on-one that we had with him. So really cool insights there where we talk about some of like especially on the one-on-one, some of the elements from the film that were removed.
Oh, love that stuff.
I know, you got to love the behind-the-scenes kind of look at a film.
Yeah.
Which, is kind of why we also loved that lava mini documentary that was released today.
It was released today, and it was...
Today is April 29th.
Yes.
Whenever you may be listening to this, April 29th, 2015.
It was really interesting because it's like the first time we've really seen a behind-the-scenes look at a film a short film, prior to it being released.
Right, it's usually like a special feature on a Blu-ray. We talked about it earlier. We're like, this is something that... In fact, what I said to you is, this is something that they should do for every release.
Yes.
This is such a great promotional tool to give a teaser of some of those background elements and some of those things that got the film to what it is today.
Right, and it was about 7 minutes long, so I feel like that is like the perfect time.
It's about as long, it's like as long as a short.
Right, but oh my gosh, it was filled with so much information. It focused a lot on the pitching process as well as the music.
Right. Well, of course, it certainly focused on the music. That is such an integral part of the short itself, since it is a musical, if you will, as far as that the song drives it from beginning to end.
But what I found really interesting is the fact that James Ford Murphy, the director, actually plays the ukulele in the actual track that is in the film.
Yeah, which is actually really cool.
I mean, I always kind of wondered if he did, because he plays it with basically in every interview or speech that he's given, he has his little ukulele with him.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting that his actually music is in his film.
Yeah, the one thing that I thought, and we kind of just busted right into this news, so we were just excited about it. It was actually really cool. So there's a couple things that I took away from the little mini documentary, and if you haven't seen it, I say this at the beginning of every episode, but anything that we're talking about can be found in our show notes. Just go to pixarpost.com, click on the podcast button, and this again is episode 37. It'll link through to the anything that we're talking about, especially for this one, the lava mini documentary. If you haven't seen it, you definitely need to. So what I connected with on it, though, is I really liked that he still had the napkin.
Yes.
That he said he sketched the original kind of characters, the two Uku and Lele characters, the volcanoes next to each other, and then wrote, "I lava you." And then he said, "I think I have a story here."
Right. And there was two napkins. He had two kind of different designs, volcano standing alone, and then two volcanoes kind of joined together.
Right. Yeah, and you included a screenshot of that in the post that you wrote about it as well.
Right.
Really cool stuff. And the other thing that was really unique about this
was the fact that we finally got to see the character Lele.
Right, the female volcano.
Yes, now you've already seen the short. You were lucky enough to see it when you were at Pixar. But for me, I haven't seen her.
Right, exactly.
So I was like, oh, this is so great.
Right, you finally get a look at it.
Yeah.
I think what I was also taken with as well, in regards to, because obviously Lele, with me already seeing her, it wasn't as impactful, but what I really enjoyed revisiting was that opening shot of the mini documentary, which is also the opening shot of the short, where it shows that like helicopter view going over the mountainscape, going down. You see the two birds in the sky, and you see the water, the crystal, like blue tealy water with the whitish sand there.
Right.
Just, it blows my mind how gorgeous the short is. And I said it after I saw it, the lighting is ridiculous.
It is.
It's so warm and inviting. You really feel like you're there with the awesome sound effects of the waves at the very beginning and at the end. Just, it's a really, really, really well done little mini behind the scenes documentary look. And
And you know what's kind of silly? That beginning shot, it reminds me of two films.
Okay. I know what you're going to say for one of them.
Okay, what?
Jurassic Park?
Of course. Well, because a lot of Jurassic Park was shot in Hawaii. But the second film, can you guess what the second film? 1999. Leonardo DiCaprio.
The beach?
Yes! I don't know why.
The beach?
Maybe it's just the beach that reminds me of it. I don't know. It reminds me of the beach in Jurassic Park. That little opening shot.
Right.
With the...
I get that part for Jurassic Park for sure. Because obviously they come in with the helicopter shot. I don't know why,
but that's like what I thought of.
Right. Oh, well, hey, if you thought of it, you thought of it. Hey, speaking of things that you're thinking about...
Uh-oh.
It's time to put you on the spot.
Oh, goodness. This is... Again.
Yeah. We've been doing this the last couple episodes, and now it's a thing. So
great.
Enjoy. So the Disney Inquisitive app, I happened to, right before the episode, pull up a thing, and they had a quiz that says, how well do you know The Incredibles?
Oh, no.
So what I want you to do is give a little bit of a pause before you answer.
Okay.
So that way, if anybody listening elsewhere, they have time to think of it as well.
Okay.
All right, so the first question is pretty easy, though. So what is the superhero name of Mr. Incredible's would-be sidekick, Buddy?
Oh, my gosh. I know it. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
Does it give you options?
Yeah. Incrediboy.
Incrediboy.
Okay.
I couldn't think of it off the...
All right. While she's still a solo hero, what color is Elastigirl's supersuit?
Oh, that's easy. It's red, white, and silver. It's like a silvery white.
Okay, so there's green with gold accents, gray with red accents, red with pink accents, or blue with black accents. You went the gray with red.
With gray.
You were right on there. Silvery is fine. It's for gray. So the last one we'll do here. What superhero costume staple does Edna E. Mode suggest against Mr. Incredible wearing? Come on.
No capes.
Exactly. A cape. I'll see that one. Yeah. Who acts as... This is a fun one. Who acts as Syndrome's assistant? What is her name?
Oh, Mystique?
That is one of the options, but I apologize. That is not correct. You're thinking of X-Men.
Oh, yeah.
That's the blue lady from X-Men. It's
Mirage.
Ooh, excellent.
I'm like, I knew it.
Yeah. So there you go.
I can see her business card.
Yeah, exactly. She gives him the business card. So there you go. There's a little fun quiz to put you on the spot. All right, so let's talk about some other really exciting news, which is that we got a breaking news story from the LA Times that the next original short film that's going to be released from Pixar is going to be ahead of The Good Dinosaur in theaters November 25th, 2015, and it is going to be called...
Sanjay's Super Team.
Right. So let's just a little brief description that they included along with the article. It says that it's a 7-minute short that begins with young Sanjay watching cartoons and eating cereal in a bland beige room as his father jingles a bell, beckoning him to join in meditation. Reluctant and bored by the ceremony, Sanjay begins daydreaming a kind of ancient Hindu version of the Avengers, with the gods appearing like superheroes. As the daydream progresses, the color, light, and animation of the film grow increasingly dazzling and cosmic, and Sanjay grows closer to understanding his father's inner world. So really kind of cool.
I'm actually really smitten with this idea. I think it's very clever to open our eyes to these different cultures. I just think, I think it's a beautiful concept. I think it's going to be an awesome story. And what an interesting way to put it off as like a superhero team.
Right. So I think it's actually an interesting thing that you mentioned as far as the culture thing, because we had a comment on the post after we did it that somebody said this sounds interesting and maybe weird. And I said, why weird? And they said, well, it's focusing on religion. And I said, well, I responded, I don't think it's necessarily focusing on religion. It's more of the cultural aspect of it. But I do like the fact that Pixar didn't shy away from it, because it does have that religion kind of undertone. Not that they're going to be preaching religion, but that it's tied to a religion in a way.
Right.
But I think it's really cool that, they are doing, I guess if you want to look at it, the Dia de los Muertos film, which is based on a Mexican holiday. So we're learning a little bit more culturally there as well. Mm-hmm. But I think it's cool that they're, that is something that could potentially, you're going to be talking about creating like a Hindu type superhero character.
Right.
But it's still really neat. And
and what's also interesting is it's opening our eyes to those Hindu gods, those characters.
Right.
You know, I maybe know of like 3, but but those are just from other movies.
Right, exactly.
Like a little princess. There was one in, it's just, I'm really interested. This whole concept really has me fascinated.
Yeah, I like the idea too. Anytime you can talk about exploring a child's imagination and what they can come up with, it makes me think back to my own.
In an adult world.
Yeah, in an adult world makes me think back to my own as far as like just like how, and it does, like I like how they say like it keeps like expanding and growing and gets more, mystical and all these things. Like that's cool because that's what it does in your mind. It's just like, oh, and then this, and then, oh my gosh, and then this happened.
Then in the end coming around and appreciating,
right.
what his father's trying to, I'm really excited for this. I just think it's going to be a very heartwarming short.
Yeah. So there's a little note about Sanjay Patel, who's actually the writer and director of this. And Sanjay's been at Pixar since A Bug's Life. So he's been there for certainly quite some time and is quite tenured at Pixar. But they also include a little, like I said, bio about him. And he says, Sanjay grew up in San Bernardino, California, the son of motel owners. Throughout his childhood, he would work as the front desk receptionist because at the time, his English was simply better than his parents. While working the sometimes boring job, Sanjay liked to entertain himself by watching good doses of Looney Tunes and other cartoons that were on television. Naturally, while gaining a good amount of animated imagery in his head, he found joy in expressing his creativity through drawing and doodling. So I just personally like the personality that's put into it, the personal element of the story that Sanjay created. And I think it's really going to connect with a lot of people. And the diversity of it is just a nice kind of touch.
Yeah. Oh, the diversity. That is great. I also think it's interesting. He's a first-time director. I love seeing the first-time directors spin and how they, work the film. Mm-hmm. Not only this being such his, love.
Yeah, personal story.
Yeah.
Yep.
But to see how he works with the film. When I see these first-time directors, it makes me excited for the future. What are they going to do next?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it does. It all those questions start going through your head. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
I know. I'm sorry.
Because next thing you know, you'll have him being because this is a superhero team, you'll have him being the co-director of Incredibles 2.
Don't get me started.
Now, wait a minute. If that happens, you heard it here first, folks. So yes, again, that's going to be in theaters as of November 25th alongside The Good Dinosaur, but it's going to be premiering as part of the Annecy International Film Festival.
Yes, a worldwide premiere.
Absolutely, which is from, you said June 15th?
June 15th through the 20th. We don't have the exact dates.
Right, the official schedule isn't going to be out until the end of May, they said, as far as the times and slots and all that. But of course, stay tuned to our site. We'll update as we learn more.
But we also found that there's actually going to be an art of book for this short.
Yeah. Okay. So this really intrigued us because we started thinking back to other shorts, and I should also note that it's going to be put out by Chronicle Books, and that the price of it is around like the $20 to $25 range, mm-hmm. which is right in line with what the official art of for a full film book costs. Mm-hmm. And we started looking back at the other books and said, okay, these are all Chronicle books. There's one that's kind of the collection of art of short films, but there isn't one for each individual film. So this is actually really intriguing. This intrigued us even more, knowing that they're dedicating a book to this.
Right.
Really cool.
I know. And what's also interesting is back in, I think, 2012, Sanjay released a book about Hindu illustrations, like in
right.
Pixar form.
Right.
So it has me really excited to see, oh my gosh, how many drawings, how much art, how much concept is dedicated to this film that they are releasing an entire art of book.
Yeah, and we talk about this, and in fact, if anybody wants to look at the article that we did from 2012 as far as for Sanjay's release of his Gee Happy, Don't Worry, Gee Happy book, you can link through. It links through from the article in this most recent one announcing Sanjay's super team. So definitely check it out. We are more than intrigued to see how much content is going to come out of this. And
kind of keeping our fingers crossed that this becomes a trend.
Yes, because, you know, the one problem I always have with books that are compilations is that immediately they're out of date. And then you have to re-release it, and then you're buying the book again, but you're only getting one more short. I'd almost rather have it be dedicated to each individual short, even if it is a slimmer book. Right. That way you're just adding that one book to your collection.
Well, that, and maybe you would get, you know, maybe 3 pages extra if it was a dedicated book to a dedicated short. I feel like compilation books, they have to slim down each film.
Right, to fit within the constraints of the book size itself.
Right, and you're missing that. You're missing, like, sculpts. You're missing, you know, color scripts. All right. Stuff that we drool over as fans.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we shall see. But really great announcement as far as Sanjay's super team. Count us interested. Count us in. Count us excited to be more culturally educated.
Yes.
Trying to figure out how to say that on the fly. Okay, so just a quick note about Inside Out, too. There was a new trailer or TV spot that was released as part of the Radio Disney Music Awards. Mm-hmm. A few new clips and things that we saw in there as far as Cloud City, a little bit more of the clown as well. Some great new lands.
Now, Cloud City, did you see Cloud City when you saw the first hour of the film?
Should I say that?
You can say yes. You don't have to say what it is.
Yes, I absolutely did.
Okay. I'm excited.
Cloud City is pretty darn cool.
I love the animation simulation between those soft, fluffy, grayish clouds against that cold, pitted concrete.
Right, and then not only the concrete, but then running into that is like where it's the puzzle piece floor and everything as at the beginning of Imagination Land.
Yes, and I want to know, is that like, is that Daydream Land? Don't say anything, but I'm excited to know what that world is.
Okay, I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, don't say anything. I'm excited to understand what that world is.
Yeah, well, you'll
or fogginess. That fogginess, like in the morning, like groggy.
Like you got a foggy mind.
Yeah.
I was doing like a lazy eyes kind of foggy mind. I wasn't just talking slow. The podcast is not in slow speed.
And it was also great to see the clown, to see that scale.
Well, we saw before where he busts out of the wall, right? So now it's like he's looks like he's sleeping and they're waking him up by honking his nose. I like how you hear the
yeah.
So pretty funny there. So speaking of Inside Out, additionally, the soundtrack was also posted up on Amazon. I shouldn't say the soundtrack was posted on Amazon, but the announcement that it will be for sale on June 16th is on Amazon. So be sure to keep an eye out for that, as we'll be updating as more news comes out there with track listings and all those kind of things. But beware, if you look at track listings for a soundtrack, they always are spoilery because the titles kind of tell you what's going on generally with the film. So if you're avoiding spoilers, avoid the titles of the tracks.
Right.
TJ's tip of the day. I think that kind of covers the news that's out there. But now I'm kind of excited. I'm really excited. I know you always talk about what your favorite discussion was, Kelsey Mann from the Monsters University press event.
Day. Yeah, the story.
I think that this one might have been my favorite.
Ooh.
I've been re-listening to them as I edit them and clean things up. And the reason why is I think strictly because of Ralph. His energy as he moved around the room was...
And you went in there, in being a fan of his. So did this just,
I went
spark that even more?
So I went in... Okay, so I'll say the other one that's competing with this was Angelique Reich's discussion where she talked about the lighting. The one that shocked me the most, that I was like, whoa, mind blown, was about the camera and layout, which both of those interviews will be coming up on future episodes. But there's just something about, I think it did kind of sway me a little bit being a fan of Ralph's work and just the mind-blowingness of like how he designed the sets for WALL-E, and then he spent so much time working on this film. He said it was his most difficult film that he's worked on at Pixar because there's just the diametric worlds of inside the mind and outside the mind, and just there was something about the way he was moving around the room. The room itself was great. I'll set the stage like I did on some of the other podcasts as well. So it's again standard long kind of rectangular conference room, but up on the walls, just board upon board, floor to ceiling, with not last week where we talked about the storyboards. Mm-hmm. This is actually like a lot of the concept art and research photography and other details that they had on all these boards. Wow. And if you go to the podcast post, which again, just pixarpost.com, click on the podcast button, episode 37, you'll see pictures of some of these boards that I'm talking about in the post description of Ralph standing next to these, where you can see some of that extra earlier concept art of some of the personality islands and a couple quick storyboards and those kind of things, and the color scripts that he did. But just really, really cool to be immersed in the art from floor to ceiling like that. Mm-hmm. On all walls. I mean, it literally was not a wall that was untouched. And in fact, there was one...
I'm surprised you could even focus.
I feel kind of bad because now that not bad, just like, bummed. I'll say bummed because I wish I had time to just literally, like, if you go visit an art gallery, after the interview was over, just stand in there and look and take it all in. Mm-hmm. Because, so much of your eye he was directing it with what board he was talking about that time. But I wish I could have lingered and really spent the time to really dig it in and really look at it and all that kind of fun stuff.
So what was Ralph's role on this film?
Production designer. So he really designed the sets, the kind of early kind of feel of it. You'll hear him talk in the interview about how it was kind of his brainchild, and the scene that he really wanted to make happen was the intro of the film where Riley is born, and then you see Joy kind of form out of the ether, as he says it, like out of the blackness, and then the memory kind of and comes in for the first one, and that whole scene, like he said, he was so passionate about it that he created and animated through an animatic by kind of sketching out the storyboards, coloring them in, and showing and pitching it to Pete that he really wanted it. And he talks about that he involved the lighting team, and on evenings and weekends they pulled together to help him create this look of the scene so that way he could really sell it to Pete.
Wow.
So just, I think it was the fact that why this one might have been my favorite as well is the amount of insights into the film. This one really got in there. So I really want to have everybody listen to this. So we'll go ahead and listen to the interview now, and then we'll pick back up with some of our other comments. But definitely pay attention to where he talks about the personality islands. I think people are really going to like when he talks about that. Really cool details about why the personality islands exist, why the ones they selected are the ones that are there, what happens to them.
See, that's what I'm excited to hear.
Right, how they form, when they go away. Like, that part I think is really going to be the part that's going to really captures people's minds.
Ooh.
From the interview. But yeah, let's go ahead and listen to it. We'll pick back up on the back end. And don't forget, we're going to be also playing the one-on-one interview. We're just going to go right from the group interview right to the one-on-one interview. So just listen to both in there, and then we'll throw in some comments and some additional insights afterwards. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Ralph Eggleston, production designer at Pixar. I've been here since 1982. I've been lucky enough to work on a lot of the films here in various capacities, consultant and designer. Actually, I've never animated here other than spelling some ideas. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's crazy. It's so weird to see the film. I've been on break for a while, so coming back and seeing all this again, it's kind of like deja vu all over again. And some flashbacks as well. So, and some of them good. This was the hardest film I ever worked on. It's the longest film I ever worked on. It's 5.5 years. Most of them take 3.5, 4 years. But this one, because of the nature of it, it's such an abstract idea, it's such an intellectual notion. What is the mind? How do emotions work? It's like pretty crazy. And it's deceptively simple when you start, but then you have to visualize it as well. And then the jumping back and forth between the mind world and the real world. Originally, Riley was a much smaller component of the film, but as the story grew, we realized you will never care about joy. Pete always wanted joy and the emotions to be the main thrust of the story, which they are. But we went through a whole phase of Riley's story got a lot bigger, and then it shrank down. But what we had to do is you would never care about the emotions if you didn't care about Riley. So Riley's story got really, really big, but once they knew what it was, they were able to kind of cut it down and strategically place it throughout the story to make you aware of how the emotions are reacting. But any change that happened in the real world affected what we did in the mind world and vice versa. So it was the hardest film and the most churn of any film I've ever worked on. These are our characters. One of the key early on things I knew we were going to have to deal with is the fact that there's going to be a difference between the mind world and the real world. So the real world tended to be leaning a little bit more on the quote-unquote realistic side of some of our films. And then the characters themselves lent themselves to just being kind of the idea of what they are. Joy is kind of like this, and sadness is like this, and fear is more like a line. Fear isn't about being afraid, it's about being so afraid you don't move at all, because if I make a decision, it might be a bad one. You just don't know. And then disgust and anger, they're pretty obvious shapes to express the idea of those emotions. If you saw joy, you'll notice that she kind of roils a little bit. Well, Albert Lozano, my character art director, had come up with the idea of a sparkler. That just felt like joy. For a while, it was only when she got excited, but then it would be all the time. And then we started looking at champagne bubbles and Alka-Seltzer. And we worked for 8 months with some of the technical crew to get that to work on joy. It was never on the other characters. And it was so expensive and time-consuming, they were about to pull the plug on it. And then we showed John Lasseter, and he says, "That looks awesome. Put it on all the characters." And then you could hear bump, bump, bodies dropping in the room. But the guys came together and really were able to make it work. Once we kind of had this idea set up, we, again, with the real world and then the mind world, the real world was a lot about hard surfaces and textures, lots of textures, high key, very bright, low contrast. There are dark colors, there's not a lot of dark shadows. And not a lot of there are reflections, but not a lot. When we get to the mind world, what we wanted to deal with is a lot of high contrast, saturated colors, translucency and light transmittive elements, architectural and growth elements within the mind. A lot of that tended to be kind of hard. These are grains of sand, macro photography of grains of sand. But we looked at plastics and a lot of flowers because they have a softer quality, and we wanted to have a whole range of basically building materials for us to build the film with. So moving forward from that, we had the Minnesota world, which has a little more color, more pastel, again, high key, low contrast, darker colors on occasion, but not a lot of dark light and shadow. Dark light. That doesn't make any sense. Dark shadows, sorry. And then we get to San Francisco, which is the same light qualities, but it's very desaturated. We wanted this great difference between the two. This is our French poster, which is awesome. I don't know if they're selling this in the store, but you should buy it if you do. This is a really important board. I call it the Brainbows board. These are actually slices of brain tissue that have been injected with various chemicals to react to light differently to make them glow. We didn't want this to be a physical film that is not set in the brain, it's set inside the mind, right? But we didn't want to deny ourselves the visual opportunity of using some of those elements to kind of help the audience along. And we've got to have a shorthand to the audience because, frankly, they don't care what the film looks like. They just want to understand it, and they want to be with the characters, right? So we had to find a lot of visual shorthands. But this board was just something I found. It's called confocal microscopic photography, and at one point we had a forest in the film, and I'm like, oh, this looks like a bunch of trees, and they could pick ideas. So we always kept this board and another board over here I'll get to in a minute. Kind of hung, they were always hanging up around our little area, the art room area, because we just kept coming back to them. And even when we had meetings with the director, they would come by just to look at it for a while, and then they wouldn't say anything, but a week later, something from this board would end up in the film, or that, or whatever. So we always have a handful of keyboards that we always refer to. Then once a lot of these basic ideas are kind of agreed upon, I would turn, as a production designer, my crew would take these ideas and run with. We had Albert Lozano as our character designer, art director. Bert Berry is our textures and art director, and then Dan Holland is our environment art director. They would take these key ideas and start building on them for the movie. I would then jump back and do what we call a color script. I'm used to doing them a little bit more in a linear stream of consciousness fashion, but because of the nature of the story churn on this film, I tried doing that, and by the time I finished a couple of strips, the story was just changed completely, so I would have to start all over. Got exhausting, so I decided just to break it down into panels. I worked on the Riley story on its own. Then I worked on the headquarters story on its own. Then I worked on Joy and Sadness' journey. And then we would sit and move them around, and then I would adjust the color and the value to kind of support the emotion of the overall of the film. You can see that the audience just needed to know where you were. So here's San Francisco. We're back in the mind world. We're back in reality. Back in the mind world. We're back in reality. So you always knew where you were. Now I know the film that you guys saw stopped at about 50 minutes in, but those two worlds do collide, and you'll have to see the movie to see what I mean. This is only about Act 1 and 2. And I probably ended up doing 600 paintings for this. That ended up, I think we ended up using about 200. Oh God, I can't believe that. But there was a lot of story churn, and so figuring out that and how it worked, and also maintaining that emotional through line, so that it just didn't feel like it was the kind of herky-jerky moving around all over the place. Really had to find the simplicity of it. It was an extreme challenge. Once this is on its way and agreed on by the director, I start breaking it down into smaller scenes. So several of those strips, for example, this is kind of the introduction of Joy all the way to here. Now I take that idea and expand on it. So those handful of paintings become a whole board of these. So this was an idea I'd come up with to see Joy get born out of the ether. And I actually animated this in Photoshop, more like a detailed storyboard, an animatic, and showed Pete the idea of how you could have this happen. And then, remember in the Disney cartoons from Warner Brothers where a paintbrush would come out and paint and then the scene would appear? I always thought that was, when I was a little kid, that was like, oh, how does that happen? I wanted to do the same thing here. I was so excited, I animated it in Photoshop, showed Pete, he thought that was pretty cool. Showed it a director of photography for lighting, Kim White, and one of her key folks was Michael Sparber. And they got together at nights and on the weekends and made this happen. We took a part of the set that we already had, and they lit it, as you see it in the film, and then turned the set off. And so all you see is the light, and then everything kind of appears. I think it works great. Someone asked earlier, was there one thing in the film that you started that was as good as what you had imagined when it was done, or better? And I'm like, that right there. I just love it. So I think they did a great job, and the animation is terrific. They did such a good job. The brain comes back in terms of physicalness in some of the design elements within headquarters. Look at the hypothalamus. We've got a lot of DNA structure here, and some cells. Again, we use some of this for the hypothalamus here. Again, we didn't want to say we kind of sawed open someone's head on the film, but we didn't want to deny ourselves some of the opportunity of using that. So then we had to deal with the islands of personality. The idea there, and it changed a lot. They were pillars at one point. It was just on a landscape at one point. There's even a painting, I think it's out there somewhere, of a hill that goes all the way down to through this tangle of stuff. The idea, the concept of the mine and what it was changed. The landscape outside of headquarters changed so much on this film. It was frightening. We finally settled on the idea of these personality islands, and there were like 10 of them, then there were 2 of them, then there were 5 of them, 6 of them, then 5 of them again. And the idea is if you become interested in something like music, it would be there. But in order to make it work and get better, you had to build on it. You had to practice. You had to go to rehearsal. You had to have concerts, things like that. Now, a little kid might be interested in playing tuba for 2 weeks and then tired of that. So that island might appear, but then it would disappear as well. So that's how some of these kind of came about. And these are kind of core things. We had the family island, which is a natural, of course. Honesty, the hardest one that we had to design because it kind of looks like Judge Island. Hockey, well, it's got to be a shorthand too. Hockey, because that's what she's very, very interested in. Friendship's an obvious one. And then goofball. Even the color palettes we tried to kind of, this one was more about the green that reminded us of Minnesota. This one has a lot of green in it. This one was hard for all kinds of reasons. I think originally this hill was kind of purple to kind of do a robe thing. Hockey was some of the colors of her team. Friendship for her was just like getting together with our little friends. And then goofball was more like a circus. What were we going to say?
What made you decide to make them islands?
Pete needed something to give the audience a clue as to what she was interested in, but more importantly, what she became disinterested in. As her personality started shutting down. That was the story need. So, yeah.
What were some of the other personality islands that you had?
Chit Chat was one. I can't remember. We were just talking earlier. I can't remember beyond Chit Chat. I really can't remember what some of the other ones were. Well, someone asked earlier, how did you guys do that? I'm like, well, we would sit and write. Okay, Honesty Island. Honesty. What do you think about? We would write words down, and then we would just sit and doodle. Like, what? I need something for that, and then we would whittle it down, and we'd get big pieces of paper and stand there with these big, giant, thick markers and just draw them. Because they needed to be readable from headquarters, which is, the pit of the mine, that's not what it's called, but the canyon of the mine is 10.3 miles across. So if you're in the center, it's a good 5 miles away. But you needed to be able to read all of those things. Now, when we go to one of those islands, as the characters do, in the virtual world of our set, it's a different set altogether because this is like 2 miles high maybe or something. This is a giant... they're still big to the characters in the movie, but it's a completely different set. So yes.
I meant to ask this to Pete, but I totally forgot. Maybe you can help. Is there any particular reason or strategic reason she has no siblings?
No, I don't know. I really don't know. Okay. She used to have siblings at one point. I think she had an older brother and a younger brother at one point. Yeah, the story changed a lot.
Okay.
But ultimately for us, it was that we wanted it to be about the emotions and not about the humans. Okay. That story grew and shrank over time, like I was describing earlier. So,
one more quick thought on the islands. Obviously, hockey being center there. We saw in the UK trailer that that they're watching soccer rather than football rather than hockey. Does this, as far as for the international release for the localization that's going to happen, is all of that animation of the hockey going to be redone and recreated for...
For Canada, we did curling.
Perfect.
No, I'm kidding. No, we only did the soccer for international, and hockey's just for North America, I think.
But as far as... So there is a personality island that's football/soccer.
That's a very good question. It's the first time I thought about that. No, not for Riley anyway.
Got it. And
we never see outside of Dad's window anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
I got you. That's actually a very good question, though. That was the first time I heard that one. So, actually, we did have at one point an idea, which we didn't do, was to try and identify or have someone, an expert, identify which soccer teams and regions of the world might end up coming to the World Cup. And then we're going to change the color of the jerseys for each one of them. We can't predict that, so forget it. Now, again, another one of the physical aspects that we kind of used as an idea for designing this film was the idea of your brain being folded into a small space so that you can have more of it. But the idea also, the fold allowed neurons to connect to each other more quickly because they're closer. So that became the impetus for the maze of long-term memory of the mind. The This sequence is a one-off. It was always in the film in some fashion or another. It was designed from top to bottom by Albert Lozano, my character art director. It's the only sequence I just never worried about. I'm just like, okay, I've got all this other stuff to think about. I'm going to let him take it over. So he did. He did almost everything himself. I mean, these are kind of sketches. I did this, and Chris Sasaki did this. But if you saw the amount of artwork that was done, 99% of it was done by Albert. Pulling that together, he did a terrific job. So the other sets, key sets in the film that I know you saw some of, Imagination Land. This was difficult because each one of the little lands was so different from one another. We have a set like Headquarters, which we did 200 something designs for. You know it's going to be in a lot of the movie, a lot of Act 1 especially. So the time is well worth spending. You get to these things, they're just as difficult as that to actually make happen. But they're in the movie for a second and a half. It's like, oh my goodness, so hard. So we waited until a lot of the story stuff settled down until we kind of tackled most of that. We were able to make. There's a great thing called the Neon Boneyard near Las Vegas. If you ever get to go, you should go there. It's really cool. Go at night too because they plug them all in. It's where all the old signs go to die.
Yes,
So, it's really cool. They had a lot of weddings there and things. Really neat. This is the train of thought. This I happen to know the exact number because what happened was we had done so much work on it. My art director, Dan Holland, loves trains. John Lasseter loves trains. I had heard this number so often I thought it was a joke. I thought I'd made it up or imagined it. So I asked one of our production assistants, I remember this number. Is that true? You know, I mean, so I said it to myself so often I thought it was a lie, you know, or that I'd made it up or something, you know, kind of false memory syndrome. And she looked it up, and sure enough, there were 284 designs of this train done, separate individual designs. There's some great stuff. Some of it's out in the art in the hallway, you'll see. But we started out with a choo-choo train, then we had a third rail train, and then John really loved the idea of it being a electrochemical like the mine, so it would be an electric train and catenary wires. And we had done some artwork showing that. There's some interesting stuff about it. The problem is in all the shots in the story we had to tell, a lot of these wires and tracks and things got in the way of the story and the clarity of where they were trying to get to. So we came up with the idea of what if the tracks appeared in front of them and disappeared right behind. The only rule then that we had to stick to, and this was once in the film a lot more than it currently is that it could go anywhere and the tracks could appear and disappear, but wherever it came to a stop is that it had to go to a train station. And we had several of these sprinkled through the mine. And again, the film we really got to focus on the character's journey. That's the fun thing. One of the fun things about designing the film that I learned from one of the great film production designers, Richard Silbert, is it's all fun and you've got to do the research. You've got to, if you don't do the research, they will know, the audience will know. But he goes, but if you've done your job right, no one will notice. And he goes, if they start talking about the sets, you failed. And he said it's not fair, but it's true. All the audience really wants to care about is the characters and their journey. And it's hard to swallow, but I know it's true. And it's the best thing for the film. So, who am I to complain? No. But this film had so much variety in it. It was like a bunch of mini movies. So it was kind of fun. Some were more visual fun than others. One of the things that we really wanted to do was a lot of theatrical lighting. There's a terrific film, you should find it if you can. It's actually not a great movie, but it's an interesting movie. And if you find the double DVD set, the extras are better than the movie. One from the Heart, Francis Ford Coppola's musical. You should see it. It's great. 1980, it bombed. It took him 20 years to pay off. But it is really cool. Music by Tom Waits. And they do a lot of theatrical lighting, like some of these set pieces. We've got Small World, which uses a lot of really theatrical lighting, pushing and pulling, saturation. But also, I was a big fan of David Hockney. These are some sets from Die Frauen, a shot in an opera, and Flying Dutchman. They're all the same color. The only thing that's shifting is the lighting. Now, I know you guys stopped at 50 minutes into the film, but the next 50 minutes have a lot of this, you'll see. It gets pretty trippy. Trippy. So we had a lot of fun with that. He did an opera called Turandot, Puccini's Turandot, which is on DVD. You can get it on Amazon. We were very lucky. I had already had it on DVD, but literally as I was showing Pete, I read an article in the San Francisco Chronicle. They were reviving that production here in San Francisco. So we sent the whole crew to see it, and we're like, yes, we're doing that. So the next time you see the movie, hopefully you'll see the whole thing, and you'll see how much of that is in the film. So anyway, that is kind of a general. I am missing something. Sorry. This is dream production. So a lot of folks were saying, well, why? I mean, it was so much fun to do. I'm a big Hollywood history buff and film buff. I'm really a big history film buff. But we had all these crazy ideas of how could you create dreams, and it was so much fun to come up with all that stuff. The problem was there was a story to tell, and if we spent all this time explaining each one of these things without a simple visual clue, and a clear clue, it's like Hockey Island and Family Island, Dream Production, the film would be 10 hours long. So we obviously couldn't do that. So this was actually the first impetus, and there was some resistance to it because, can't we do something different? And you know what? It ended up being exactly right. It's a shorthand to what we needed to say and move on. What's fun about this, especially in the context of the very next sequence that you didn't see, is the contrast between this and what you're about to see. So this is like a fake version of reality. The next sequence is a real version of fake reality. So it's
Mind blown.
yeah, it's pretty trippy. I'm not kidding. So it was also as much fun as this sequence was for Al. That next sequence was mine. That was the one I wanted to do. So I got to kind of take it over and do some lighting studies for it. I really had a lot of fun with it. So that is a smidgen of what it took to kind of put some of the design work for this film together. By no means all of it. We had a terrific team of people within the art department. The art department's it is the only department that has to work with every single department on the show: editing, story, technical, lighting, even post-production, and advertising and marketing the film, and toys.
Yeah, so what year, you said that you've been working here since now?
The very, very end of 1992. I started on Toy Story.
So how has your work changed? I mean, how has technology changed your work? Because I guess now you're doing more like computer-based instead of hand-based, or?
When I first got out, I've told this story a lot, but it's true. When I first got here, they put me in a room with two wonderful people, Tom Porter and Bill Reeves, and these guys are brilliant. And they explained to me how computer animation works. I come from traditional animation and drawing and painting, and after about 5 hours, my brain was just about to explode because I'd never worked with a computer before. I got out of that office. I literally walked out of a room like this, not here, but, and John Lasseter saw me. And John was John. He wasn't John, then. And he saw me. He just started laughing, He saw my eyes kind of spinning. And he put his arms around me and said, you know what? Those guys are brilliant. They do something you can never do. But you can do something they can't do.
Which is?
I can imagine what we might need, and they can actually make it happen. So that moment on, that specific moment, in my entire career at Pixar, I have never worried about how it was going to be done. And the more I do this, the less I worry about it, because we've got our tools are so much better, blah, blah, and they're always changing. So the more I worry about that, the hard part is coming up with this, at least for me, is, what they do is brilliant. And then also there's always compromise along the way. I'll go back and redesign something 3 or 4 times, not to change what I was after in terms of an idea, but to compromise with them. We can do this, but we can't do that. I'm like, I can make that work, The hard part is when you don't know what the idea is. So.
But you still do a lot of hand?
I do a lot of chalk and pastel and paint. On this film, it was probably 30% chalk and paint and pastel, and the rest was digital. Mm-hmm. Hopefully on the next thing I work on, it'll be, I really want to get back to this. Drawing and painting. There's something very much different when I'm able to it comes out of my brain, down my arm, out of my hand. Seriously. Yeah. The physical act of doing it is different and not better, but I enjoy it more. And it depends on the project. So.
I was going to ask about the inspiration for the control panel in headquarters, kind of where that came from. I don't know if it's a quick question.
It's not. We did so much. We had all these control panels. We had each one of them. For a while, it was like a jungle gym. I forgot what it's called. What do you call it when you have the thing on your arm and you threw the ball? like that.
Highlight?
What? Yes, highlight. Yeah, it was a highlight thing, and they would throw emotion. We had this other thing where the characters would express themselves like this, and the colors would kind of appear, kind of a very Fantasia-like. Each one of them had their own different kind of control. Anger was like a fire pit, and sadness was all about water. What we wanted to end up saying is we needed to be one control panel because you wanted the emotions to be fighting over it. And so that's kind of where we ended up. And we put a lot more thought into it than it ended up needing. A whole lot more. So.
All right, well, that wrapped up the group interview. Now enjoy our one-on-one interview with Ralph. You had obviously talked about going around and doing some photography, and you had all the different people going around. Pixar's known for their research. Obviously, we know Pete talked about going and doing some of the mind stuff as far as learning about the emotions and everything.
To the Chicken Ranch.
So yeah, that's what else I want to know. What else from the research inspired everything?
Okay, for a long time, there were a lot more. Early on in the process of this film, there was a lot more about sorting the memories. We sort them by like grandma memories or smell memories or even the colors. It's the
I saw there's some artwork out there from Daniel Holland?
Dan Holland, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that was a lot more prevalent early on. And we even have big sorting machines and all this stuff. And it lasted for a while on the show. So we were like, well, what kind of things sort? And we went to the Jelly Belly factory. That was fun. Yeah. No. And then, but because of what we do, we were lucky that it's like we got carte blanche to go through the whole process of making and eating Jelly Bellies. And then we also, one of the gentlemen that used to work here, his family runs a chicken and turkey farm. Mm-hmm. And one of the businesses there is eggs. So it's like laying eggs, packaging eggs, finding USDA, all of that. So it was all about the kind of sorting. We have lots of video and photographs of that stuff. So that was really early on. It seems so long ago that it all fell by the wayside.
Sure, but it's still interesting
nonetheless.
It
is.
Absolutely. Okay, and then I think one of the pieces is, yes, this train station.
That's another Dan Holland.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, your name
I painted it.
I was going to say, your name is attached to it because it was at the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
As part of the Walt Disney train
thing.
thing. So talk a little bit more about the train development. I was glad when you said that there was a lot of them.
There were 284 designs. And Dan did, I think he did almost, I'm pretty sure he did all of them.
Okay.
And it started out as a choo-choo steam train. Mm-hmm. And Dan loves trains. He didn't, I think there must have been a point where he got just frustrated. But he loves drawing trains, and he knows a lot about them. I'm not mechanically inclined, so I didn't have any problems with it. But you should see the variety. The Art Up book has a lot more, but that's still just a smidgen of it. The idea that we want originally, we always loved the Mary Blair train, the little from Make My Music or Melody Time, one of those films I've forgotten, or Three Caballeros, something I don't know. And that's what we want. And the train was a lot more prevalent in the film originally. That's how they actually moved around, and they rode a hand cart for a while. It's whittled down. But it was just a fun little train, a train of thought. But John was the one who suggested it really needs to be an electric train because it's an electrochemical thing in the mind. I personally was having problems not with the catenary wires and the post everywhere. You could make it really fantastical. But the fact that we were going to have to shoot this film from unknown angles at that stage meant that it was just going to get in the way. I mean, the frames are going to get really busy. So the idea of it having catenaries was going to be painful, I think, to shoot and to move around on a shot-by-shot basis. We can't do that. I mean, we can, but it's expensive. The idea that the tracks would appear before and disappear after resolved that. Like I was saying, the only rule that we had to put in place, and again, it was more prevalent originally, was that wherever it did come to a stop, it had to go to a train station. Those didn't move. They were always there. So that was the idea.
Right.
We went through so many, we set it down for a while because we just couldn't get over the hump. And finally, I came back and said, you know what it really should be? It should be like a caffeinated production assistant. That's exactly what I said. It should be like a caffeinated Bambi, the deer, production assistant. It ought to be someone who's like really good at their jobs. Like, for example, Jonas Rivera, our producer, started out as a PA. I was on Toy Story, and he was still in college, right? Yeah. But he knows enough about filmmaking and animation, and big Disneyland nerd. But he loved the process, and he was one of these guys that he was like Radar from the TV show MASH. Mm-hmm. You were about to ask a question, and he had it. Here you go. Right. Yeah, and he wasn't trying to kiss your rear or over impress. He just wanted like all of us, I think, wanted to feel excited about the process of we're all making this film together, and even my little small part or my big part, we're all kind of in this together, you know. Absolutely. So that's what it was really about. So, but the train for a while was like a cap, and it was like, yeah, let's go. I've got all these ideas. We're gonna have to go. You know, on take off. Right. We were even gonna have it where it just became a streak of light for a moment, and then the camera caught up to it, and you see it kind of as a train going. Let's go.
Okay.
You know, even when it came to a stop, it could barely stand still. Like, okay, where are we going to go next? You know, that fell by the wayside. We set it down again for a little while. And then John had seen this. John likes trains, Lasseter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is I think it's based. Oh, you should talk to Ann Holland. I think it's based on a German train. The idea of it. I wish I could remember the name of it. But it a lot of it fell by the way because we needed the story of joy and sadness was the key thing. Right. Anything that got in the way or ate up time was, and we designed a lot of stuff that fell out of the film, and sometimes it felt awful, but it always informed something in the story. So whether or not you see it in the film or not, it was kind of like on WALL-E. We designed that whole world. We didn't build it all. Mm-hmm. We understood it all. I could tell you everything about that set. And the same with this film. I could spend an hour on each one of these things. And I'm like, well, here's why that happened. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying that's the reality of how it happened.
All right, so there we go. The group interview as well as our one-on-one. I have to be honest. Listening back when I was editing it, it made me really freak out in a way.
Freak out in the greatest way possible?
Yeah, like I literally, when I was there, it was all happening so fast and things were going on.
It's almost a blur.
It is a total blur, but I'm going to be honest, it's really got like, yeah, I'm so freaked out. Like I can't even vocalize how amazing it was that I got to sit down with him one-on-one, ask these questions. It's crazy. It is crazy that was an experience that I was able to have and talk to him. I mean, that's big in terms of the people that I respect as far as from an art standpoint. And I told him at the very beginning, I cut it out because I just went on and on at the one-on-one about how I requested his one-on-one interview specifically, and I'm so glad it was granted because I love the way his mind works, and I explain a little bit more of those reasons, and he goes, oh, well, thank you for saying that. He goes, that's really nice. And like I just went on, and it was a crazy intro, and I didn't even I just wanted to gush. I didn't even want to talk about the movie per se. I just wanted to be like, you're awesome. Yeah. End of story. So it was, at the time, even though I gushed, it still was kind of all happening in someone else's world. It
was kind of like that story when you said you met Ed Catmull.
Yeah, my legs just started walking. Yeah, I just didn't know. So he talks about in the group interview that what's coming up as far as what we hadn't seen after the first hour is like a real version of a fake reality. And he says what we already saw was a fake version of reality. He got into this whole he says that it's trippy. But he got into this whole thing about how it's fake reality versus real reality. Well,
that's a mind bender.
And I kind of feel like that's what the event was for me. It was this fake reality that I was living. And I definitely...
good analogy.
I definitely got to geek out for sure. But looking back and while I was editing this, even editing the group interview, I was still part of a group. When I edited the one-on-one, I was like... Oh my goodness, I was actually able to just sit down and delve in and really get some of those details. So I wanted to talk about a few things from both the group and the one-on-one that I thought really kind of stood out.
Okay.
So that they spent 8 months to get Joy's skin to get that bubbling effect.
8 months.
I know. Could you imagine like having a project at work, or, you know, like think about people listening to this in your day jobs or whatever it may be, or school, that there's like some issue or problem that you're trying to tackle. Could you imagine investing 8 months on it?
That's almost a school year.
I know.
Just
and then they said, like, you know, okay, so this was originally only going to be on Joy, and then John Lasseter saw it and he's like, that's fantastic, we have to do it, and we want it on all the characters. And it's just like, the fact that the technical team had to dig in and figure this thing out and makes it so much more special when you actually see it. And it is super cool. It's a really cool little detail that, I shouldn't even say it's a little detail. It's a pretty big detail when you see it in the film. It's so cool to see them, you know, bubbling like that, like champagne bubbles and everything.
I'm really excited because, you know, we've only seen it on TV. Granted, we have a larger TV, but to see it on the big screen, to see those bubblies left as, you know, they walk and jump around.
Yeah, and I talk a little bit about those as far as like the little particles that dangle in the air. I talk about that with Angelique. Ooh. So I won't reveal anything too much there. But some of the other things from the group discussion with Ralph was where he talked about he completed like 600 paintings that he did for the film, and about 200 of them were used.
Wow.
And he goes into the fact of like the art of book and how there's so much more that's in there. It's like, give me it. But it literally was like being in the room was being in an art book.
It was like you were stuck in a page.
I was. It was so cool. It was so cool. And I love just some of the other details too, that there were 200 separate designs, individual designs done for headquarters. And he said, you know, if you're going to spend that much time there, you better make it what you need. And in fact, on our social media channels, we do a Friday fun fact from time to time. And this Friday, I'm going to actually do one about the train of thought. And I'm going to throw it out there. You know, maybe people haven't listened to this, you know, that maybe they're going to be out there. But if you see our Friday fun fact, the answer is in the interview that from Ralph Eggleston. But it's going to be how many designs were done for just individual unique designs were done for just the train of thought. It's mind-blowing. So stay tuned for that on Friday. And if you've listened to this, you already have a little bit of an insight there. So I talked about before the interview even started about the personality islands as well, and how much I thought people listening were going to like that. And I thought it was so cool that there were like, they talked about how many there were. There was 10 originally, then there was 2, then there was 5, then there was 6. And they needed this visual way to show what Riley was getting into and what she was getting out of. As far as, you know, he talked about like playing tuba. Like you might play it for a day, but that island is not going to stay stable and running if you don't continue to practice and all those kind of things that make it something that's such a major thing in your life. And he talked about that there was like Chit Chat Island and all these other things. God, it's just so cool. All the insights,
so amazing,
and background. And I just was like, I hadn't heard it in any of the other sessions that she used to have siblings. Like she had an older brother, a younger brother. I was like, holy cow. I just want to know, like, you know, with 5.5 years of development on this art of book better be like triple the size. I know that most movies are, you know, close to that. You know, they're 4.5, 4, 5, but 5.5. I feel like that alone, let's just make it like triple size art of book, because I want to know even more. I want to know all this stuff. So cool.
Makes me wonder what 5 islands I have right now. You know,
maybe you have more than 5.
You're right. I probably have 35.
Oh boy. So anyways, we hope you really enjoyed our discussion with Ralph. Certainly, like we always want to know, let us know what you thought as well. Leave a comment on the post, send us an email, info@pixarpost.com, leave us a voicemail, 415-799-POST is the phone number. You can always find all these details just on our homepage, under the About Us contact page, or right on the homepage there under the social media buttons. But either way, speaking of the social media buttons, that's where you can follow us on all of our different channels, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Twitter, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Vine, whatever you'd like. You can find us there. And I think that about wraps up episode 37 of the Pixar Post podcast. What do you say, eh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, in the meantime, signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to PixarPost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Bye-bye.